Okay, hi Scott, how are you?
I'm great. How are you, sir?
Doing fine, thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. I
Thank you
appreciate
for
it.
having me.
So, it looks like you're a busy guy. On your bio, it says you're a diverse businessman, entrepreneur, banker, investor, musician, and now author. Let me start with musician since I'm also a musician. What do you play?
Guitar,
Okay, what kind of music do you play?
all kinds. I don't do that a whole lot much anymore. I have reverted more to doing some writing, actually writing some songs with my son, but not too involved in the musician world as much anymore. But just for lack of time. But guitar. But I played all kinds of music. Played in country bands, oldies, jazz and R&B. I love it all. I love all kinds of music.
What sort of businesses are you involved in?
Well, I work for a bank during the daytime. I'm in some construction products at night. On the weekends, I sell solar in Florida and also do some real estate investment, buying, selling, flipping, that kind of stuff. So all that keeps me pretty busy. We still try to spend some time with the family too.
Well, it sounds like it. And now you've written a book as well, and your book is called Lost Arrows Coping with the Death of a Child. Is this a personal story?
Partially. I tell the story in the first chapter of the book. As you probably saw, I lost my son in August of last year, and I had been through some extenuating circumstances because actually, about 4 years prior, it had been 9 years since I'd seen my son due to just custody situations and stuff, and so at the time I didn't like it. Obviously, nobody would, but in retrospect, I'm thankful that I did go through some of that and learn to cope with it because, quite frankly, if I hadn't of, I don't know where I'd be today emotionally. I feel like that was definitely it was an opportunity for me to learn some skills that I would need at a later date.
Okay, so this was a son of yours from a previous marriage, is that correct?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
how old was he when he died?
He was 32.
Oh, okay. Do you want to tell us the situation of the death?
Sure. So, I mean, he was born with, and I of course tell the story in the book. He was born with five major heart defects, and at the time he was not a candidate for a heart transplant 30 something years ago because his heart was upside down on the wrong side. He only had three chambers versus four, so a lot of extenuating circumstances. But they were able to do what was called a Fontan procedure when he was three. That was a rework of the heart. It was an open heart surgery. They took the heart out, reworked it, and made it where he was able to live till he was about 21. And at that time, they felt that they could, with technology advancing as much as it had, be able to actually provide him with a heart transplant. What's interesting about that story is that the doctor that told us he wasn't a candidate years before was actually his son that 20 some years later was able to do the transplant, Dr. Kirkland. So it was a pretty amazing story. And so, like I said, his mom was um, real protective. I guess that's the nice word I can use of him. And unfortunately, about 4 years ago, be 5 years now, she passed away unexpectedly, and so then he was able to come and be with me, and so I got to spend the last 4 years of his life with him.
I don't know all the details of that particular heart situation, but did he live a normal life or was he very restricted as to what he could do?
Somewhat restricted. I mean, he could still work. I mean, he couldn't get out and run and play football and that kind of stuff, and that stuff really didn't interest him anyway. Um, so I mean, he did have his limitations, but I mean, functionally, I mean, unless you knew it, if you just saw him walking around or talking to folks, you wouldn't know that. I mean, after he had the transplant, that he had an issue.
So the book, was this sort of a cathartic exercise for you in the sense that you wrote it to kind of deal with the death of your son?
Partially that, but also, I mean, as I said, I felt like that I had learned a lot through the years on how to cope with loss. Because, even though he was still here on earth, I couldn't talk to him, couldn't see him or anything. And there was a lot of things that mentally and emotionally that I was able to do. And that, I knew I was going to have to equip myself with, similar things to be able to get through it. And I've done a lot of things since that time, too, that have made it, frankly, even better. Again, I told somebody the other day, my son was my best teacher in life, and he was my best teacher in death.
That's an amazing story. So, okay, so you said the book is set up so the first part is telling the story of your son, and then the other parts is telling how to deal with this. Is it a sort of a guidebook for people a bit?
Yes, sir. Yeah. And it's not just about, obviously, I think most everyone would agree, and I think there's historical accounts to, stand behind it too, that, there's a lot of things in life, and I'm not saying that one thing's worse than the other, but I think losing a child is far worse than maybe losing some other relative, just because it's against the natural order of things. And I wanted to not only help myself, but also help others and share his story, because it was an amazing story on how some things that I had done, some things that I had done some research on that, could help, cope with dealing with the death of, not only a child, but really anyone. So it's not just, even though it was, dedicated or focused on children, it certainly, I believe, can be a grief help for anybody that's lost anybody. One of the first things, and I'm sure you've probably heard of him, Hal Elrod, who wrote The Miracle Morning. Hal, let me borrow a part of his information called The Savers. One of the things it's the whole premise of his book about what you do every morning, a routine and a ritual. And Hal was gracious enough to let me utilize that information. And I read that book just a few weeks. I was doing a class on real estate, and the folks that were running the class suggested that we read a number of books, and this happened to be one of them. And that book has been a foundation for me, and I highly suggest it to anybody. I think it's one of the top books a person should read. And I've only, catapulted and added to that thing, to those things for myself on, different parts of that again have been even more beneficial now when I look back a year later on some things that I've done on top of that are still kind of encompassed in that Savers program.
Where did you find the time to write this book? It seems like you're so busy with everything else you're doing.
Well, part of it was the Savers, frankly. I mean, part of that book is about getting up early, doing things. And so what I did is I set aside an hour every morning well, first I did research. So I had an hour every morning I was doing research. And then once I'd done that for about a month or two, probably 2 months, then I began writing the book, an hour every morning. And so within about 2 to 3 months, I had finished it, just, doing an hour every morning. I mean, I'm, being in sales and all that I've done through the years, I sometimes it's hard for me to keep my mouth shut and my fingers tight just as fast.
Did you publish the book yourself, or did you go through a publisher?
I used some folks, actually Steve Gordon out of Tallahassee helped me with the book, but it is a self-published book. But Steve helped me through that process. But yes, sir.
Okay, I was going to ask you about how you found the process of self-publishing, because some people have said that it can be quite daunting.
Initially it was, but I mean, I could, once it's like a lot of things, once you learn how to ride a bicycle, you can do it. I mean, now I actually have several other book ideas that I'm planning on putting out at some time. And, I know the process now. So it's not, it could be, it's just like anything else that has a lot of steps to it. It can be intimidating, but once you go through it, it's like riding a bicycle.
So you mentioned that you have some ideas. Do you want to give us a little tease of what might be coming down the pike for a new book?
One book that I'm pretty strong about, it's called Consensuality. Everything in life, and it's such a simplistic process, and we do it so many times throughout the day that we don't even realize it. We consent to this, that, the other, our emotions. We consent to people around us. We consent to this practice, that practice, that guidance, this guidance, so many things. And we underestimate the power of consent. Matter of fact, I think it's why the world's in part of the mess that we're in, because we've consented maybe somewhat reluctantly, but also unbeknownst to some things that we just think we're supposed to. So I think it's, that's one. There's a couple more that I haven't researched as much, but one of the things that I've done since that time too, I've trained to become a life coach and grief coach, and so I'm working on that. I'm going to start a podcast myself next month called the Renovation Network. And it's about mental renovation. And because I think that's really, just like you have your own, broadcast that you have right here, Mr. Coleman. We have our own broadcast station too, and it's in our head. And the good thing is that, we can choose who we want to listen to it. We're the ones that should be listening to it if we're broadcasting the right things. So a lot of things that are kind of geared towards mental and emotional renovation. And I think that's so important, because I think that's why we have such a problem within the world. Everything that faces us, it's all about division. And my honest opinion is that everybody in this world is more alike than we are different.
I agree with you, and I think it's a matter of people figuring that out. We tend to hold on to the small things and don't look at the big things that bond us all together. On that note, we're going to have to wind this down. We are out of time. Thanks so much for coming on. Do you have
Thank you.
a website that you want to give out?
Sure, lostarrowsbook.com, and it has all my links to everything, to all my social media, to the book. It's on Amazon. It's also just released through Ingram Spark, which will be at Barnes and Nobles, Books A Million, those kind of bookstores and things. And so, but lostarrowsbook.com, LOSTARROWSBOOK.com.
Okay, great. Well, Scott, thanks again for coming on the show. It was nice meeting you, and best of luck with everything.
Thank you, sir. You too, sir.